All right, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. I think it's safe to say that the winter has not officially passed. What do you think? Maybe so. Well, I was preparing for this week's message teaching about Balaam, Balak. This portion that we're reading today is called Balak. And I think the background of it, who's the most prominent person in this parasha? The donkey. Maybe with the most wisdom too. In the days of Israel, the kings are calling. And who are they calling? They're calling the people of our Father, the people who knows and who speaks and interprets the wisdom and word of Yotevafe for wisdom. And this was true in Israel's day, in the day that they were standing on the edge of the river. Remember, at this time in history, it's at the end of their desert walk, and they're ready to enter the land of Israel. And as we were singing this morning, I just felt that it's like the world is standing on a precipice of entering. There's a few tests for us yet, as there was a test for Israel at this stage. And when the kings came calling the one person that they knew that spoke for Yotevafe, the Lord of Lords, they came to Balaam. In our day, the same is true. The kings of the earth are calling for the wisdom unto people that can interpret the word of our Father. And what is the response from the believing community today? Is it prominent? Is it speaking the words of our Father? Or are we falling into the same trap that Balaam fell in? I think this portion is more relevant in our lives now than may have been ever before. Let me just get my technology working for me. So Balaam was a Gentile believer in Yotevafe. Do you agree? He was a prophet of Yotevafe in the nations. He was sitting in the same part of the world that Abraham came from when he was initially called by our Father. And it says that he heard the words of our Father, and the nations knew that whatever he spoke happened. And he spoke in the name of Yotevafe. All right? When he consulted our Father at night, when he went to his chambers and listened to his voice, our Father spoke to him directly. He said, "You will speak only the words that I speak." So there must have been a relationship between our Father and Balaam, I would imagine. The problem is, I think, that we meet Balaam in his latter years, in years that he grew to fame, and the knowledge of his wisdom and whatever was known among the kings of the earth. And because he became well known as a prophet, his experience, his words, his interactions, whatever he was experiencing made a turn away from the truth of our Father. If ever he knew the truth, I'm not sure about that. But he knew the Father, he got to know him, followed him. But when we meet Balaam, it is a story of a prophet that is led to greed, that's prepared to motivate other people to walk away from the truth, from where our Father wants them, and eventually where he led himself and the nation of Israel and Balak led to his downfall. So initially he comes to our Father, and when Balak convenes with Midian, and together they make a good plan, or they make a plan that seems to be good. And they send delegates, the elders of Moab and Midian, to Balaam and ask him to come and curse these people because they are like grasshoppers. They came from Africa, from Afrikaans. They are like grasshoppers licking up the grass and everything that seems to grow. And you know the story, we read it again this morning. And the first time, what was the answer from our Father? Definitely no. Forget it. The people that you are called to curse are surely blessed, and you will not bless You will not curse a people that are blessed. So he sends them back. He heard from our father. He sends them back. He says, surely I won't be able to do it. What Yotevave speaks, that I do. Nothing else. Is that our commitment and our confession? Must be. It should be. You know what happened in his life? As he was presented with that question a second time. So what happens in our lives when we think about a matter that is prominent? Other people come for advice. Things that in your life that happens that are very prominent. And you receive an answer from your father. It seems contrary to wisdom. And you go think about it again and you ask for it again. What did Balaam hear the second time he asked? Go. Why now? Why did our father seemingly change his mind about this deal? What happens in our lives when we ask the Father over and over and over until we hear the right answer, the one we like most? The Father leaves us. He gives us permission to go and to do the thing that we have chosen. Because now, we have asked him this first time, and we heard from the tree of life the truth, we go back and we think, now we are starting to support on the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What is good and what is evil? Now we're making our own decisions. And the Father gives us permission to go. He says, only speak my words. But now it is open for interpretation. It would have been good if he stayed. We all agree on that. So, Balaam must make a decision. Who is he going to follow? And this is where the problems start. The Father says to him, actually, the second time, he says, if the people come to you and wake you up and say, come, let us go with them. What is the next sentence? Balaam saddles his donkey and he's waiting for them to come. He already made up his mind what the answer should be, and he stood on that answer. And this is a little bit of a word of caution for us, spending time in prayer and asking the Father for a possible outcome that we already have in mind. Are we really prepared to hear the Father's answer, the direction that He is leading us, or do we want His support in a decision that we already made? There is a little bit of a difference in that, in the possible outcome. So for Balaam and for Balak and everybody involved, now it becomes a decision of who are we going to follow. And your heart condition in this matter will determine the outcome. How far are we prepared to go with what we really want to have happen before we hear the Father's word, finally, yes or no, and turn around and go back to Him and ask for forgiveness? So, and it all depends on our heart condition. Is your heart soft and pliable, able to hear the voice of the Father, His word, easily, quickly? We submit to His word, or do we stand and ask and pursue our own way until we interpret His support? So the focus of the story today is, firstly, what is the reason for Balaam to be in the picture in the first place? Who brought him into this picture? Balak. Because Balak had a problem. Balak had a nation of Israel that came to cross his territory to the northern side, and they are encroaching on his space, and he's feeling terribly threatened. Okay, so is the reason for his fears, are those reasons true? They are, remember the stories that Balak heard, was conquering the Amalekites. All the ites were suffering because of Israel being in the presence of. Remember what happened to Egypt. Firstly, when they came out, Egypt was destroyed. So the story of Rahab later on in Jericho. There's Rahab in Jericho. Yes, I always get Hagar and Rahab confused. So Rahab in Jericho, her confession is, the fear of Adonai is upon the nations because we heard the stories and how He's leading us. What about Balak? He heard the stories too. So he is in utter fear and desperation because he's his nation is about to be overrun by Israel in his mind and in his heart. But our father said, and the reason we didn't know is because Deuteronomy wasn't written yet, but okay, all right. Deuteronomy says, and Adonai said unto me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land of possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. They were to honor, Israel was to honor the ground, everything that belonged to Moab. And the reasons for Moab's fear was ungrounded. And if Balak only consulted, if he consulted Balaam to ask, what is the reason? Maybe, I don't know, I'm speculating. The reason for Israel's presence here, he might have heard the truth and relaxed. But because he had a pre-made up mind of what is the answer, we know that tragedy started to take place. So I think we are living in a similar time where the nation surrounding Israel is living in fear because of the presence of the Father that has got a purpose and a plan for that nation, and the perceptions of what Israel is going to do to them is bringing him into a place of fear, and we know what the outcome is going to be if they threaten Israel, and our Father is going to fight for them at the end. This is the way these three goes, and it started way back when, and it's still with us today. So the role players of today is King Balak, acting out of fear and desperation to save his nation without the information of truth to arm him and to help him to make proper decisions. Balaam is a believer in the nations that will do anything for fame and for money and for being a prophet. He's not a non-prophet, he's a prophet for profit. And then there's a donkey. Always wonder about the donkey. I think the donkey, what will it resemble? What do you think is the wisdom of the donkey? What is the reason for it being there? What does it symbolize? Any ideas? Rian, ek sien jy wil antwoord. Okay, good enough. Before you say that though, speak on the trumpet.
I read a book about coincidence in the Bible in the Hebrew text, and this guy, he just saw that every time a donkey was used in the scriptures, New Testament or Old as we think about it, there was a spiritual transition happening. So,
what do you think was the spiritual transitioning that was happening in this case?
I think it's the blessing spoken over Israel.
Okay, all right. Remember as well is that I think this is the 24,000 people that have died because of what was happening was the last of the generation that had to die in the wilderness. That was part of what was happening. So I think the donkey is enabling, this is those people in your life. The things, the people, the items, the whatever the Father has placed in your life, enabling you to go down your way. So what has the Father brought in your life and my life to enable us to go from where we are to travel into the purposes of our Father? So, and sometimes the donkey has got wisdom. Just sometimes, unexpectedly, it's got wisdom. And the people, the things that the Father is using in your life, in my life, we should sometimes just listen. Just listen. Because although the Father is dealing with you and you've got responsibility for your own decisions and the way that you should go, people along the way will help you, will give you wisdom. And in those instances, don't reach out 3 times hitting the donkey. Just listen. Then there's the messenger. The messenger we know is a representative of our Father. And Israel is sitting, waiting to enter the promised land with the expectation of goodness and wonder and blessing. And there's a place of functioning in the wilderness, and they are being prepared to take the promised land. And I think that's the transition that we are speaking about. They are ready. They are ready to enter the promised land. We are in a generation, they were in a generation that the Father proclaimed is good, ready, able. So, do you think this generation that we are living in, what do you think about this generation? Are we ready you and I, are we ready to enter the promised land that is the Father is calling us? We're sitting on the Jordan River, on the banks of the Jordan River. So Israel was sitting, they spent 40 years in the wilderness being prepared. 40 years being their hearts being prepared. And they are ready to enter the promised land. Thing is, sometimes there's a roadblock in your life and in my life. And in Israel's life at that stage, they had to make each person were presented with a test. Just now, after in this Parasha Balak. They're presented with a test and how they are going to respond. How are they going to respond to the world, to the outside, to the daughters of Moab, to the idolatry that Moab presents? Are we going to respond to follow the Father alone, or are we turning around and being distracted? And I think in our lives today, there is these challenges and those different levels are being presented to us. So, for each individual, the men of Israel, looking at the daughters of Moab. You know, it's always interesting if you work through a parasha, these things happen to you. So I was working at a hotel, the Views Hotel, with beautiful views in wilderness. Nogal in the wilderness. And on the edge, we're standing on the edge. So innocently as Israel would. And so I went out, one of my guys, we had to do a certain task at this hotel, at the restaurant. And I went out on the deck because we had the stuff there. I looked over to the hotel on the other side, the old Holiday Inn hotel that was just there. And there are drapery. This is my business. So the potential is beautiful on the other side. And I'm looking at, starting to calculate the sizes and the costs and marketing. And as I was looking newer and older, I was looking at this, suddenly there's an open window. And there's a young daughter of Moab presenting herself in. So I realized, Parasha Balak. Turned around and I was just about to run when I was thinking, just focus on where you should focus. There's a private challenge to each one of us every day. And if we are working through what the Father has for us, it's on different levels. Because Balak wants to entice us. Remember, this is the kings of the earth, not Balaam. He's just a mechanism. Balak is the threat. The kings of the earth today. And you know what? One of the kings of the earth is living not far from us. In our country, is a leader against Israel today. And they are enticing us to take hold of things that can draw us away from the path that the Father wants us to go. So what are the teachings of Balaam? We find this a reference in Revelation 2:14. And it speaks about the teaching of Balaam in the church of Pergamum. And we know the church of Pergamum is commended, but it also says that you have tolerated the teaching of Balaam. So, and in 2 Peter 2:15 and Jude 1, there's warnings to the generation that lives in the last days, to what will happen with Balaam. Let me just read to you 2 Peter 2:12. It says, from 12, it says, "But these men are like natural unreasoning beasts, having been born to be caught and to destroyed, to blaspheme which they do not know, and shall be destroyed in their destruction." Are we talking about the worldly people or the believers? This is speaking to believers that are combating spiritual forces that they know nothing about. Being about to receive the wages of unrighteousness, deeming to indulge in the day of pleasure spots and blemishes, reveling in their own deception while they feast with you. Having eyes filled with adulterers, unable to cease from sin, enticing unstable beings. Not very good people. That doesn't sound like your neighbors. Verse 15, having left the right way when they went astray, having followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. But he was rebuked for his transgression through a dumb donkey speaking the voice of a man that restrained the madness of a prophet. So, I think in the world today, as we look around us, the qualities or the qualities of the people that we are faced with around us are trying to lead the people of our Father astray and to entice them to walk in ways that the Torah has never specified. The Word has never said that we should go down. And I think if you look at the teaching in 2 Peter 2 and Jude, it specifically speaks about those that has got a false teaching to the church, to the believing community. And what are we saying to one another that can spread the doctrine of Balaam? And we should be careful for that. There are 3 areas. First, curse the people that are blessed. Remember, our Father said to Balaam specifically, you cannot curse them because they are blessed. And yet he chose to go. So firstly, the teaching of Balaam is on the areas of morality, of having funds for ministry. If you get me to come and curse you, as long as you pay me and I'm honored, I'll be happy to do whatever it takes. And the teaching of supersessionism, of replacement theology, part of the story of Balaam, which we should be careful for. So it's a serious problem. And just when you think the enemy has passed and he is not able to curse you, Israel didn't even know that this was taking place. They were standing and they were having braais every day. They sort of positioned themselves. They got their techies on. Everything is good. We are going to go through the Jordan, about to enter the promised land. And this was happening around them. Eventually, it influenced them because of what the kings brought into the camp. So what was his main objective? Balak is to bring the nation of Israel into unfavor with their God. That was his intention. So how are we responding and living our lives that can bring us into unfavor with our Father? This is the warning that Parashat Balak is presenting to us. Because there is a time that the Scripture says that the Father, Elohim, our God, can become an adversary. And this is actually in this parasha. It says in Numbers 22:22, the displeasure of Elohim burned because he went against Balaam. And the messenger of Adonai, of Yotevavah, stationed himself in the way as an adversary against him. What is the word for adversary there? Do you know? Well, let me show you. It says, if I can read it, it's now too small. It says that the messenger, the malach of Yotevavah, was in the bederach, in the way, as an adversary to him. And the word adversary is lasatan. You see that? Lamet, shin, shin. So, interesting. The second verse is in 1 Kings, Yotevavah raised up an adversary against Shlomo. His name was Hadad the Edomite, and he was the seed of Sauron of Edom. And again, if you look at the text, it says, Vayakom Yotevavah Shin Tet Nun, Satan, an adversary to Solomon. It's difficult to think that against a believing community, this can happen. So, 11:25 says, and he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Shlomo, besides the trouble that Hadad. Same story. And the text says that Vayehu Satan to Israel is Israel all of Kol the days of Solomon. So, what our Father did is He raised up people to be it's not the adversary, it's an adversary to the people that were not following in His ways, that were walking contrary to our Father. So if you would be the staatsanklaer, what's that in Engels? The public prosecutor in Israel, what would your job title be? Not something that we would prefer in the believing community, because it will be something along those words. Satan is an adversary. It's a prosecutor. It is. Okay, so that's what happens. Now, what does the public prosecutor typically do to you? If you are transgressing the word, if you're transgressing the law, what will he do? He will come for judgment. Okay, so this is exactly what happens. You'll be disciplined and you'll be judged. So I looked at King David's last poetic words that were written down. And his last words, firstly, the person, the narrator in the book of Shmuel, the book of Samuel, says, and think about the testimony of a man's life. And these are the last words of David. The saying of David, the son of Jesse, the saying of the man raised up on high, the anointed of Elohim of Yaakov, and the sweet singer of Israel. Isn't that amazing teaching of someone that looked at David and his life? And he said, this is this man's identity, and this is what he has been doing. And what David has said in 2 Samuel 23, what was written down about him, it says, the Spirit of Yotevave has spoken through me, and His word is on my tongue. A man coming at the end of his reign, to the latter days of his existence, and this is your testimony. The Elohim of Israel said, the Rock of Israel spoke to me, one who rules over man righteously. The Rock of Israel spoke to me. Who rules in the fear of Elohim is like the light of the morning when the sun rises. When the darkness of the nation subsides, and you look at the sun that's rising, it is when the Father, when Yotevave has got reality in this land. He's worshipped in this land. And this is like a morning without clouds and the tender grass from the earth, from sunshine, from rain. It paints a picture of a man that is totally submitted to what the Father is doing and where He leads them. He says, for is not my house so with Elohim? So during the time of King David's reign, the house of Israel, the nation of Israel, were brought into a place where this is where they are at. Is not my house so with El? Why is my house, the house of David, like that? Because our Father has made an everlasting covenant with me, ordered in all matters and guarded. He's the Shomer Israel. For all my deliverance and all desire, shall He not make and send forth a branch? Our Father has prepared Israel to be ready for the deliverer to come, that will shine a bright light to the nations so that the nations can be saved. This is the last words that David wrote down in poetic form. 2 Samuel 23:5. Now what happens just after that? The adversary appears. The adversary. Next verse, 2 Samuel 24:1. And again the displeasure of Yotevave burns against Israel. Why? We don't know. And moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Yehudah. Next chapter. We just heard the blessings of the Father resides in Israel because that He is the King, the deliverer, the one that leads us. Next chapter says, the displeasure of our Father burned against whom? And this is important to know. Against Israel. The displeasure burned against Israel and moved King David against them to say, go number the children of, or the men of Israel and Yehudah. Who does our Father use to do this work? Check this. 1 Chronicles 21 tells the same story. And Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. Who does our Father use when discipline needs to be given? It's interesting. So, just a reminder here, when I was thinking about this, what did Moses do? Was Moses faced with the same situation? Because David should have stopped. Let's go read the Torah. Seeing that I have, as a king, needed to write the Torah out for myself, let's just think about this a little bit here. Okay? What did Moses face? In Exodus 32, when he was up on the mountain receiving the tablets of stone, the nation of Israel started to revel and dance and threw the earrings into a fire and out jumped the calf. That's by the way Aaron's rendition of this. So, what did Moses do? Exodus 32:10 says, our father says to Moses, and now let me alone that my wrath might burn against them and I consume them and make you a great nation, he says of Moses. Okay? Isn't this the same sort of context as what David is experiencing? Remember, the displeasure of our father burned against Israel, the same as in Exodus, and he moved David against them to say, let's wipe them out. Whatever we are doing now is going to cause a problem in Israel. Moses was said, move away so that we can make a great nation of you. Moses pleaded with Adonai, his Elohim, and said, Yotevaveh, why does your wrath burn against your people whom you have brought out of the land of Mitzrayim with great power, with a strong hand? Immediately what Moses did is he fell on his face and he started to intercede for Israel. I think I had some notes here that I want to. Okay. So my thoughts on this were, what was the options for David? What was the options that he could have gone through? What do you think? Tanirina? What? To do as Moses did, to intercede immediately for Moses. When Moses came down the mountain and he found Israel to be in a rebellious streak, what did he do? Firstly, he came down and he broke, as a sign of the covenant that was broken by them, he broke the tablets. Then he went down, he said to the Levitical, the tribe of Levi, and he said, who are against me? Who are for God with me against the sin that we are seeing? And the Levites strapped on their swords, and they ground down the golden calf into powder, put it in the river, and they made the nation drink, and those who were said to follow the golden calf worship, 3,000 of them died. Judgment. To Samuel 24:14, and David said to God, when he realized, 9 months and 20 days later, he realized. Because remember, just Yoav, I think I've got it later, we can speak about it again. Yoav comes to him. What does Yoav's names mean? What does his name mean? That's what I'm meaning. It says, Yoav is Yotevaveh is of my father. Yotevaveh, our father. David, you are the shepherd of Israel. What shall you do? So he says to David, with a command to number Israel, he says, my king, why would you have to do this? We know that if the numbers of Israel are falling short, the Father can multiply them by 100. Numbers don't matter. Remember Jonathan. He didn't say that, but you should have remembered this. Remember Jonathan and his weapon bearer when the Philistines were just across the reach. Jonathan thought, numbers don't matter. He attacked the nation on his own, and the Father brought a victory. Numbers don't matter. Why do you want to do this? And David realizes this a little bit too late, 9 months and 20 days later. And David said to God, the prophet, I am in great trouble. I often say that to myself. I am in great trouble. Please let us fall into the hand of Yotevaveh, for his compassion is great. But do not let me fall into the hand of man. Because what was presented to David at this stage? He says the father says to the prophet Gad, he says to him, Go and you shall speak to David. Thus says Yotevaphe, I hold 3 options before you. Choose one of them, and I will do it to you. 3 options. Gad came to David and informed him and said to him, should 7 years of scarcity of food come to you in your land? First choice, David, you choose. Which curse would you choose? Famine. Is that what you would want for 7 years? Or would you flee 3 months before your enemies while they pursue you? You fall into the hands of men. Remember, there are 4 judgments that the Father typically brings on Israel. Sword, famine, pestilence, and beasts. From the beginning to the end. We'll see them in the Revelation again. So the Father makes him choose between the 3. He says, famine, the sword, or should there be 3 days of plague in your land? Now know and see what answer I take back to him who sent me. So, David says those words. He says, let me not fall into the hands of men, that they pursue us with sword. I would rather fall into the hand of Adonai, of pestilence, because he is compassionate. I know him. And Yotevaphe sent a plague upon Israel from the morning and told the Moed, told the appointed time. And from Dan, from the north to Beersheba in the south, 70,000 men of Israel died. And the messenger stretched out his hand over Jerusalem to destroy it. There's a messenger in this scripture as well as in Balaam. Remember, the messenger stands with a sword in his hand. And Yotevaphe relented concerning the evil and said to the messenger who was destroying the people, it is enough. Now stop your hand. And the messenger of Yotevaphe was by the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. And David spoke to Yotevaphe when he saw the messenger who was smiting the people, and he said, see, I have sinned, and I have done perversely, but these sheep, what have they done? Let your hand, I pray, be against me and against my father's house. Now Moses is coming out. This is Moses' actions. Because remember, our father sent a plague to Israel back in the day, the golden calf. 3,000 men died. But when Moses, up on the mountain, before all of those things happened, he prayed to the Father and he said, let this not be what will the people think of your name. May your name be glorified because you brought these people out of Egypt. Do not destroy them. It says in Exodus 32, it says, and Yotevaphe relented from that decision. As it says here, same words from the evil, same words here. So he acts as Moses acted. Eventually. So when intercession was needed by King David for Israel, it was in a time that Israel and Judah didn't trust their father. It was during that time, and it was Israel that were the object of the judgment, not so much David. But David functioned as a priest and as a king and as a prophet. Only king that functioned like that. And he had the opportunity to go, because what did he do just after this? He took an offering to Araunah, to the threshing floor of Araunah, built a altar and sacrificed to the Father. There was a threshing. This is an interesting point, because there was a threshing floor of Araunah. It is in the same time that the tabernacle was still standing. Why didn't he go to the tabernacle? Firstly, the Ark of the Covenant was here. At the tent, another place. At the tent that David established. This is the third place. The threshing floor of Araunah. Because this is where he saw the angel that the Father spoke to and said, stay your sword. And he went and he brought a sacrifice there. Yoav, yes, in Hebrews 12 it says, let's just read Hebrews 12:11. It says, and indeed no discipline seems pleasant at the time. When 3,000 of your nation dies, or 70,000 of your nation dies, it's not pleasant, but grievous. But afterward it yields peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Hebrews 12 says, And you have forgotten the appeal which speaks to you as to sons. My son, do not despise the discipline of your Adonai, nor faint when you have been reproved by him. So I think what we should do is we should help and encourage one another. So when we are confessing, I am in trouble, those words, we should help one another to hear the voice of our Father and to see where we have walked away from the ways that our Father has called us in which to walk. Turn back to him, intercede for one another, pray for one another so that healing might come. For whom Adonai loves, he disciplines, and he flogs every son whom he receives. And it's good to hear the words in Hebrews, to read through them and to acknowledge that. Think of your experience as a young boy in the house. It was not so pleasant at times of discipline. But the Hebrew says we had respect for our Father because he disciplined us. How much more shall we respect the Father of lights that disciplines us and brings a rich harvest of righteousness? But when Israel is disciplined and 70,000 people dies, how will we as a believing community experience this in this day? Say Israel today is judged because they are transgressing the word of our Father, moving away from him, and they are disciplined. 70,000 people die. What will our perception of our Father be? Will our hearts be turned towards him or turned away from him? It's difficult. Because our humanity, our humanism, humanity, and our thoughts of who our Father might be will confuse us. The good news is the one with the hay, Hasatan, he is not free to do as he pleases, but he must be operating within the boundaries that our Father has established, because our Father uses him to discipline blasphemers in 1 Timothy, to prevent us from sinning, and to cause us to grow. Helps us to grow. So, thing is today, when Israel is living among the kings in the wilderness, we are faced with exactly the same problems that they were faced back then, because they were family. Remember who was Moab? Moab was family, direct family of Israel. And so was Midian. Midian was Abraham's son, and they conspired to curse Israel. So my question is, why do nations back in the day and today overreact when Israel do things that they do? It's because of those reasons. It's not really against Israel, but it's against the God of Israel that they stand up. And then Israel becomes a target. And in that process, when the people stand up against Israel and everything is going on, what happens to Israel? They are being refined. They increasingly should turn their eyes to our Father and get away from the influences of the kings and the nations and hear the voice of our Father. Because the problem is, the Israel that is called today is made up of a huge percentage of people that are not believing fully in our Father. That's the truth. There is a remnant of believers in Israel, Baruch Hashem. There are many that's not. But in the difficulties that they are experiencing, increasingly so, their hearts are compelled to turn to our Father. And that's our prayer. That's why we pray for the peace of Jerusalem, is that their hearts will be turned to our Father in days of need and desperation. The problem is, and this is where we come in, as almost said proud South Africans. Let's just call it South Africans. That's where we come in as a nation. We will be held responsible by the Father of the way that we have treated Israel in days of desperation. This is our responsibility. When Israel was coming into the land, they weren't standing at the alarm clocky thingy. Sorry, that still needs to be removed, I see. But they were positioned right there, north of Moab, south of Ammon, and they were ready to enter into the land, close to Mount Nebo. And the nations saw that Israel's presence was threatening them. and they conspired, one and more than one nation, to get him out of the land. From the river to the sea, Israel will be free. Right, so what's the responsibility? Our responsibility of the nations is to take care of Israel. Jeremiah 50:17 says, Israel is a hunted sheep. Lions have driven him away. First, the king of Assyria devoured him, and now at last... Have you ever seen Nebuchadnezzar's name spelled that way? Nebuchadrezzar. It's not a spelling mistake. It can be Nezar of Drezar. It means that Nebo must protect his crown. So whatever the way it is spelled, it's a bad message. Verse 18 is, Therefore, thus says Yotevah of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land, for as I have punished the king of Assyria. And I will bring Israel again to his pasture, and he shall feed on Carmel and Bashan, and his soul shall be satisfied on the hills of Ephraim and Gilead. In those days and at that time, says Adonai, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for. Is there iniquity in Israel? Definitely. But in those days and at that time, says Adonai, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for, and there shall be none. Who is seeking for the iniquity of Israel at this stage? The ICJ, the ICC, the UN, South Africa, and all his friends. Everybody across the earth is looking for the iniquity of what Israel is living out. And although the Ukraine experiences a hospital the other day that was blown to pieces, and the babies and the young children were in desperate need, Israel takes them in and takes care of them in their hospitals. Nobody says a word. You focus on the stuff that makes the headlines. In those days and at that time, says Adonai, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought for, there shall be none. And the sins of Judah, and they shall not be found. For I will pardon them whom I leave as a remnant. We're on our ways to those days. They are near. Because of the pressure that's put on Israel is causing them to focus on their deliverer. That prayer, or that words that David spoke, is true in this day as much as what it was back then. So the family of Israel. Who are the family of Israel? We are the family of Israel. Are we living according to the Father's heart desire? If we look at living contrary to the teaching of Balaam. Do we live according to our Father's heart's desire? Remember, the Leviticus teaching that we went through is still true. As it was back then, so it is today. Are we living that life? Back in the days of the golden calf, think about these questions. Were they living according to the Father's heart's desire? Not so much. Were they living the Leviticus life that our Father commanded them to live? The teaching of His character that they need to adopt, embrace, be transformed into? No. Were they reacting according to the fear of the Amalekites and all the otherites and the spies? Were they turning around from the promised land, not trying to go in because of what the nations are doing? Were they a shining light in the darkness? No. In the days of David, think about those ideas in the time of David. Not really. What about the time of Yeshua? Were they living according to the Father's heart's desire? The Leviticus set-apart lifestyle. A reaction to the schemes of the nations, the Romans that were in the land, the whole Levitical priesthood authorities were turned to Rome, not to our Father. Were they shining light in the darkness? The Father is taking us to the last days, in those days and at that time. And if we are in those days and at that time, what does it speak about our hearts? Are we reacting to the schemes of the nations? Are we being a shining light in the darkness? Comforting Israel, speaking words that will lead them back to the Father's presence. Because there is a door that we know of. And you know that the word dalet it means a door. And if you look at the old pictographic Hebrew, it's not the block writing of the Babylonian script, it's the pictographic. It says Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. And if you look at those, that is the dalet. That represents the dalet. Okay, so Yeshua says in John 10:9, I am the door, and whoever enters through me, he shall be saved, and he shall go in and go out and find pasture. We enter into the door of covenantal relationship through Messiah. That's something we all know. And if you spell out that name Dalet, Dalet. I wonder if I should do this. If it's a Dalet, a Lamed, and is it a Tav or a Tet? Is it a Tav? I had it there somewhere. Can't remember. It's a Tav. It is a Tav. All right. Okay. Dalet, Lamed, Tav. So let's return. If we start with the Dalet, one of the wonderful renderings of the pictographic script was like that one there. It's an open door flap. That's what it looked like. And it evolved. In the time of David, it more looked like a triangle, like that. All right, so this was the rendering of a Dalet. If you go to a Lamed, this is a shepherd's staff. And if you go to a Tav, it's a sign of a cross. What's the message of the door? It is the door of authority. The one that presents himself as the door to our Father's presence, brings the authority of our Father, will submit himself to that cross for us. The door of our Father, the one that he brought, is true in Messiah. And if we look at the prophecy in today's teaching, have you seen this? This is interesting. In the days of David was the beloved one. He was the king. He was the king, priest, and prophet that made Israel into the nation that they became. So it speaks of a star. Today's Torah portion speaks of a star that will rise. It does. It does. There it is. It says in Numbers 24:17, I see him, but not now, and I observe him, but not near. And a star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and he shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy the sons of Seth. Who said this, by the way? Balaam. It was one of the most prominent blessings of Israel in the Torah. So a star shall come out of Jacob. Who was the first star that came out of Jacob to make Israel great and to settle them as a nation, to take Israel, Jerusalem as the capital of the nation? It was David. So it was David. Let's just say David. So Dalet. Dalet speaks about the truth of our Father. He brings the nation into the presence of our Father. He brings to stem this curse, he brings sacrifices to the altar. 70,000 people died, but the curse was broken. Dalet speaks of our Father. But the son of David brings the presence of our Father back to the people. This Star of David speaks about the reality of our King. It says in 2 Corinthians, it says that Messiah has a ministry of reconciliation. He reconciles our Father to us, humanity. Something that's missing here. Because if you look at the word David, it's Dalet Vav Dalet. No? Dalet Vav Dalet. How do you pronounce that word? Remember, the Vav was pronounced W in the beginning, not really V. Later in the Chronicles, there was a Yod entered there to pronounce his name, to make it David. Not so initially. So it can be pronounced as a oo or a o as well, depending on the context. So I don't think you should call David dude. Could be. So I don't think we should go there. That might not be King Dude, might not be the right way to pronounce his name. Let's just keep it at King David. Dr. Pigeon has a teaching on this, and it's quite hilarious actually. But the problem is, what is missing in the Star of David? The Magan David. What is missing? There's something that's missing. We are missing a Vav. We are missing the Messiah. Really. We're missing that Vav. If that is a representation of David and his son, Yeshua, we're missing a Vav. And Yeshua is the Vav. Yeshua is the one, because Yeshua is the connector. He brings heaven to earth. He brings earth to heaven so that we can be reconciled fully to our Father in a covenantal relationship. So is that a Freemason sign and used by the enemy for great destruction, and should we avoid it at all cost? I think it is a Freemason sign, and it's used by the enemy for confusion. But initially, it speaks about David and our Messiah. And I don't think we should run away from it just because the enemy has some connotation to it. So the teaching of Balaam is prominent in our day. And it will increase in intensity and the broad spectrum of representation even as we go forward. Because firstly, what is the experience of Christianity in this day? How does it present itself? Mainstream, big, great Christianity. I think financial gain is one of the things that people, when you speak to them about being a Christian, the first thing that comes into their mind is the big names. Those guys with the big planes and the golden baths and the taps, that all of the people that are misusing the word for financial gain. If you think about the Roman Church and the immense wealth that they have accumulated over the years, what is the stance that the head of the Protestant and Catholic churches are taking today in terms of Israel? Do they make a prominent stance? Do we hear them in the news coming against the political leaders, giving direction? If they do, it's confusing because their message is not clear. Promoting a lifestyle that's not according to the Torah. We are set apart in Messiah if we are sanctified continually in His presence and walking according to the walk that Messiah had when He was walking on the earth. So the one question, if people ask us a theological interpretation of shall we do this, must we eat this, must we do this, whatever the case might be, the one prominent question that will solve all woes is, whose disciple are you? Are you living according to the practices? Look at the practices of Messiah when He was on the earth. Or are we living according to the suggested practices by a theology that's found in modern theology? If you're doing the one, and when Messiah walks in that door and we don't know it's Him, and He sits in a chair here, and He participates in what we are doing, will He recognize what we're doing as part of the faith that He has professed 2,000 years ago? Or will there be foreign things going around that He doesn't recognize? Whose disciple are we? Are we a disciple of Messiah Yeshua, living a lifestyle that is founded on Leviticus, or are we living something contrary? So, the biggest problem in our day, or one of the things that are gaining prominence, is anti-Semitism, and replacement theology is. I don't think for us as a congregation we really know how far replacement theology has gone. Can I just read? I've got a couple of quotes. There's hundreds of them. The Epistle of Barnabas will be well understood if I got my glasses. Right. The Epistle of Barnabas, who's heard about this? This was a thing that was recently discovered some years ago, and it made the headlines in the Christian community. And it says, only the Christian could make the sense of the Bible. The carnal Jews, with their earthly mindset, had failed to recognize the hidden message of their own scriptures, and as a result had eternally forfeited their entitlement to the covenant promises in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That is the epistle of Barnabas, an apocryphic scripture. Ignatius of Antioch, he lived in 50, the year 50 to 117. He was a contemporary with the apostles. He was living in the same time. And he said that those who partake of the Passover are partakers of those who killed Messiah. So where does it lead us? And remember these are the foundation stones of building the Christian faith. These are the foundation stones, and we are seeing the fruits in today's life. It's founded of 2,000 years of confusion. And Irenaeus made an error. Irenaeus said, he was living in the year 130, and he was a student of Polycarp, who was a student of the Apostle John. He was living just here to the apostle that loved Yeshua the most. He declared that the house of Jacob and the people of Israel are disinherited from the grace of God. Tertullian of Carthage, 155 AD, says, he blamed the Jews for the death of Messiah and argued that they had been rejected by God. Cyprian of Carthage, 200 after Messiah, he was a student of Tertullian, the guy that just lived in the Apostle John. The Jews departed from God and lost God's favor, while the Christians succeeded in their place. Well, we Christians, when we pray our Father, because He has begun to be ours and has ceased to be the Father of the Jews, who has forsaken Him. Eusebius of Caesarea in 260 says, he taught that the promises of Scripture were meant for the Gentiles and the curses for the Jews. He asserted that the church was the true Israel. Saint Jerome, who translated the Bible into Latin, described the Jews as serpents wearing an image of Judas. St. Augustine, more of the prominent guys, he says, why has God allowed the Jews to continue to exist? His answer was that although the Jews deserved death, they were destined to wander in the earth to witness the victory of the church over the synagogue. Martin Luther was a breath of fresh air. Yeah, he was. In 1523, entitled a book called That Jesus Christ Was Born a Jew. It says that he surveyed the medieval anti-Semitism and proclaimed, if I had been a Jew and had been such dolts. What's a dolt? A bolt, I know. Dolt, I don't. Anyways, and had seen such dolts and blockheads govern and teach the Christian faith, I would sooner become a pig than a Christian. That was Martin Luther's confession. 20 years later, though, in 1543, he wrote a pamphlet entitled Concerning the Jews and Their Lies, because he thought that the Jews would follow his teachings, and they didn't really. He says, they are a miserable and accursed people, stupid fools, miserable, blind and senseless, thieves and robbers, the great vermin of humanity, lazy rogues, blind and venomous. He made some proposals that Hitler took on. Synagogues and schools should be burned, the houses should be destroyed, the Talmudic writing should be confiscated. Rabbis should be forbidden to teach, and their money should be taken, and they should be compelled into forced labor. So the foundation fathers of the Christian faith, I'm afraid, has followed the teaching of Balaam to a great extent. And even in our day, we are still built upon that foundation. So we should ask ourselves, are we a disciple of Messiah Yeshua that wandered in the earth, that walked and talked and preached and lived on the earth 2,000 years ago in the values of the written word, because he was the living word? Do we find ourselves there? Or are we a disciple of an institution that walks contrary in some respects? Most believers, Christian believers, have got beautiful hearts for our Father. But there needs to be a restoration of how we walk as a testimony of the one that we follow. Replacement theology, in essence, removes Messiah from his Hebrew Judaic background, historical context, and he becomes an image on a book with long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a white garment with a red sash. Have you seen that? Does it sound familiar? That is how the royalty of the Roman order were shown to be. He became a Roman, took away the heritage of Israel. We've got some changes, Shabbat to Sunday. We've got the Feast of Adonai to some others. Leviticus lifestyle gets aborted because the law is no more. The church appropriates the promises to Israel while we leave the curses to Israel. Grace alone abounds, no urgency to be transformed into the Levitical lifestyle of being sanctified into the image, transformed into the image of Messiah. What will Yeshua say if he attends? And this is one of the big things, is we are standing in time on a precipice that is drawing us, humanity, and the ways we are following our Father to a close. And the things that we say and the way we respond and react to and deal with Israel and with one another and the word of our Father, we are going to be held responsible. Because primarily what you see in Revelations are the curses of Deuteronomy for not following the word. So if we don't want to go through the curses of Revelation, let's change our minds as Christianity and follow the word of our Father and speak favor to those that the Father favors. So, the problem is the replacement theology is deceptive, and this is a big topic, and we're not going to speak a week, it's just about at the end. But it removes from Israel a national destiny to be back in the land because she rejected Messiah Yeshua. That's the point of turning for the church. The Father caused Israel to be blinded for Yeshua for our sake. Partially blinded. Yes, the word says if blindness had come upon them, how much more glory will it be when the Father comes and introduces himself to them. So, unfortunately, if you look at the pompous presentation of certain orders of Christianity, arrogance and all sorts of things became the order of the day. And Balaam is not ignored. We are building on the foundation stones of Balaam. It says that the Abrahamic covenant has been abolished for Israel. That promises the eternal stewardship of the land in Genesis 17:7. So why is Israel's ownership, stewardship of Israel being contended in this day? Because of Balaam. So the confusion comes in the political arena because the Christian leaders, the Christian church cannot give proper guidance to the plans and purposes of our Father for Israel in this day. And because we fail to give leadership unto the political arena, we are sitting in trouble. But because the church wants to be politically correct, we don't say a thing. Morality and accountability are diminished because the Torah is no more, and strange fire is brought into worship. Strange fire is brought into worship. So, and we have forgotten the calling of our Father to the nations and to Israel. The calling of the Father on Israel is still to be the light to the nations. The remnant of Israel, the remnant of our Father, the believers, you and I in the nations are called to worship our Father with Israel. We are Romans 11, we are grafted into the olive tree and we are worshipped as one family, showing the glory of our Father in the earth, supporting them with a go through and drawing the people that we meet unto our Father so that they can join in this one family. So, unfortunately, there's the elect, I think, to a large extent has been seduced because there's a great falling away that the Bible speaks about. I think at the end of the day, the word says that our Father will allow an anti-Messiah to deceive those who are thought to be righteous. The primary deception will come to a believing community. This is where the primary deception comes in. Not to those who live in wherever, not thinking about our Father, His purposes, or we Israel is not knowing anything. They're already deceived. The deception will come to a community that believes and walk after the Father with their hearts, not knowing the truth. And the problem is, he will be I wrote charismatic in there and I thought, oops, that might be interpreted wrongly. He will be a leader with charisma, but his heart will be as Balaam's, that will say and do anything for prominence and wealth, not based on the Torah of our Father, not knowing where Israel is in the world, in our Father's eyes. So the choices that are before us, really, is who is the God that we follow? You know how we know? How do we know? So which God's commandments do we walk out? How do we know that we love Him? Obey my commandments. You can say that we love one person, but if you walk contrary to that person's desire that you should walk in, you don't really. So think about what is our Father's character. Is that what we are living out in the earth? So, I think in South Africa today, there's a choice that we are making. And the government at this stage says, our government says, if you have anything to do with the military in Israel, if you return to South Africa, you will be jailed. The intensity of the choice for and against Israel is going to grow significantly in our day. Who is the God that we are following? Who do we obey? Are we for Israel or against Israel? Those are the choices of prominence in your lives, in my life, and in my children's lives, and in their children's lives. And we should encourage one another, equip one another to stand in this time for the truth of our Father's word and where He is leading us. Otherwise, we will fall into that same confusion. Isaiah 62:10 says, pass through the gates. Which gates? Who's it speaking to in the first place? Pass through the gates, prepare the way for the Ha'am, the people. Build up the highway, remove the stones, lift up a banner for the people, for the Amim. Speaking about the stones of Babylon, it's as we are coming out of Babylon, open the gates so that we can return. There's a message of teshuvah, of return, so that the way for the people to welcome the King can be prepared. And lift up a banner of Messiah. Lift up the banner of Messiah for the people so that we can come. See, Yotevava is proclaimed to George. George is at the end of the earth. Yeah, we are 10 kilometers from the end of the earth. Say to the daughter of Zion, George, see, your deliverance has come. See, his reward is with him and his work is before him. What the Father has been doing in the earth for thousands of years, that work is before Him. Is it before the people that we are living in because of our actions and the ways that we deal with? We are a little window of our Father's heart to the people that lives around us. And they shall be called. Who shall be called? The people that's coming out through the gates. Set apart people. Why? Because we live in the reality of what the Father is doing in our lives. We are living out the message that He has called for us, and we are being sanctified back into the character and the ways of our Father. The redeemed of Adonai, and you shall be called a sought-out city. Jerusalem shall be called out a city, a sought-out city. Together, we are praying for the peace of Jerusalem, for the restoration of what the Father is doing in our lives and in the lives of Israel. And together we stand for truth and for our Father in this day. The teaching of Balaam is gaining prominence in our day. The church of Pergamum is addressed with Balaam. You know where Pergamum is, the word says? It is the seat of Satan. Pergamum is the seat of Satan. So if you want to know where, in Turkey. Turkey is just north of Israel. In the western side of Turkey, on the coastal areas. That's in Pergamum is, I think, where they got that statue of Zeus that's sitting in Berlin. Isn't Berlin? No, that's the seat of Satan in Berlin. Yeah, Zeus is in Rome. Everybody kisses his feet, unfortunately. So, the church, unfortunately, has gone through thousands of years, and the Father is bringing us to a choice where we are presented before going into the promised land to choose for Him, to restore the truth in our lives, to choose His ways and His words above everything else, and not being influenced by the sayings and the calling of a king to bless a nation that is cursed, to curse a nation that is blessed. Because that's what the kings are doing. This is what our king is doing. To curse a nation that is blessed. Unfortunately. Father, we ask you for your guidance, for your Ruach to be in our lives, so that you will give us the wisdom to live lives that is pleasing to you. Wisdom to live a life of truthfulness and worthy of the kingdom. Help us to restore the kingdom principles in our lives so that we will live a life that is shown to live a life following our King, our Messiah, Yeshua. Help us to open our hearts and our minds and to help us to be aware and identify the stumbling stones that must be rolled away. Where gates are put up in our way as we are coming back to be restored to your perfect place, Father, we ask that you will give us the wisdom and the insight and the knowledge, the ability, the zeal to walk through the gates that the enemy has put in our lives to restoration. Father, that we will stop glorifying the enemy and that we will glorify you instead. Stop spending time and focus on the works of the enemy, but that we will recognize that you have called us to a higher and great purpose. And you are the one that is putting your hands around us and leading us in this way. Help us, Father, to submit our hearts and our lives. Even places like Nella prayed this morning where we've got fears and brokenness and things that are keeping us from entering. Father, you are the healer. You are the one that heals. And we ask, Father, that our hearts, that we will find the courage to open our hearts so that you can heal us in this day. That we will follow you in all of our ways and all of our days. Because the word speaks of in those days and at that time. I've got a strong suspicion we're already in those days. We're waiting for that time. Help us, Father. Help us to be a shining light so that your name can be glorified in everything we do and say. In the name of Yeshua, your Son, we ask this. Amen.